Hey you guys, it's Peter and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I have learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. And I was just talking on here the other day about how I start my day sometimes filming with coming over here and reading meditations and talking about things, and that's been so good for me to start with the meditations. But today I went with my cousin for Cousin Fun Day, and then we came home and I have filmed about 6 videos or 5 videos. This is my last video before I vlog. And so I thought, you know what? My friend Tanya Jean and I were just talking about the language of letting go last night. And so I think that I'm going to read some meditations from this, or maybe Journey to the Heart. I haven't looked at them yet today. So I was like, let's jump on here and do a little meditation video. So I went with my friend Tanya Jean last night to our home group meeting, and we were talking about like just different books that we've read throughout our lives, like self-help, motivational books that have just helped us so much. And we were like talking about which ones we love together and things like that. And Melody Beatty wrote originally Codependent No More. And Codependent No More is the book this is the meditation, the positive affirmation book that comes from Codependent No More, the language of letting go. And so Tanya was saying last night, she was like, I think I kind of want to revisit Codependent No More. It's been a long time since I've read it. And I was like, and I've shared this in a lot of videos. As far as like self-help and motivational books, besides and maybe even more so sometimes, besides my basic text for the 12-step program that I'm in, the Codependent No More by Melody Beatty has, oh my God, has probably been the very close second to helping me the most in my life. And so I was like, yeah, I think I might read it again too. And then she was like, well, we could talk about it and stuff like that. And I said, you know, I still read a lot of the meditations from the language of letting go when I make videos. She's like, I read it every single day. And so we were talking about this last night. If you've never read Codependent No More, no matter if you consider yourself codependent or not, it can help anybody, okay? Now, when you start reading it, it's a lot about people who have partners that are drinkers or alcoholics at the beginning of the book. But if you get past some of the stories, the book, and I would still continue to read the stories, because if you look past it and you kind of see your controlling behaviors and ways you try to control outcomes and things like that, I think all of us can relate to that and sometimes at some point in our lives. The book is phenomenal. And that's just the very beginning of the book. Codependent No More is probably, other than my basic text, is like the book that has helped me the most in my life. So I thought today I would look into the language of letting go and see what the meditations say over here to us today. I don't even know what today's date is. It's the 22nd. Okay, God, October just flew by, didn't it? October, and I haven't made a video over here in a couple days, so we've got a couple to look at. Okay, October 22nd, holding your own. The one before is like 3 pages. Hold on a second. Financial responsibility, detaching with love, our good points. What's the last one that I talked about on here? Throwing out the rule book, feelings and surrender. What's the last one that I made over here? I think it was being honest with ourselves. Oh, letting go of chaos was the last one. Maybe let's pick 2 of them. I don't know why, but I'm being pulled to feelings and surrender from October 17th. Surrender is something I've been talking a lot about lately. Surrendering is a highly personal and spiritual experience. Surrender is not something we can do in our heads. It is not something we can force or control by willpower. It is something we experience. Acceptance or surrender is not a tiny package. Often, it is a package full of hard feelings, anger, rage, and sadness, followed by release and relief. As we surrender, we experience our frustration and anger at God, at other people, at ourselves, and at life. Then we come to the core of the pain and sadness, the heavy emotional burden inside that must come out before we can feel good. Often these emotions are connected to healing and release at a deep level. Surrender sets the wheels in motion. Our fear and anxiety about the future are released when we surrender. We are protected, we are guided. Good things have been planned. The next step is now being taken. Surrender is the process that allows us to move forward. It is how our higher power moves us forward. Trust in the rightness of timing and the freedom at the other end as you struggle humanly through the spiritual experience. I will be open to the process of surrender in my life. I will allow myself all the awkward and potent emotions that must be released. I think this is such a powerful meditation. And you know, the idea of surrender and acceptance is really interesting to me. It's something that I talk a lot about in recovery. It's something I talk a lot about with my friends. And I have this kind of saying that I always say, like when acceptance comes up in meetings, I'm always kind of like, well, what's the alternative? You know, resistance, I guess. Like when something is going on in my life and I'll hear people say like, I just can't accept that, right? But really, what is the alternative? The alternative is you won't accept it now, but down the road, you're going to have to accept it because it's a reality of life. Surrender is letting go of any trying to controlling of outcomes, and what happens, happens. It's not saying I don't have any free will in this. It's not saying I don't have any choice. It's not saying that I don't have any control over my own actions. It's surrendering to what has happened, what your feelings are, your emotions are, and surrendering to the honesty of that. Surrender is a huge part of recovery. And I it's interesting because I was talking to a friend of mine last night, and we were talking about prayer. And prayer is something that I firmly believe in. So if it's not something that you believe in, just skip this part. But we were talking about prayer, and they were saying to me that, like in their history, they compartmentalize a prayer a lot. And I was talking about fear and, and prayer. And they were saying that, they were like, have you ever noticed that there are certain things that you won't pray on because you aren't ready to surrender or let go of your control over those things? And to be honest with you, in a very long time, I really hadn't thought of it that way. That if I am a believer and I have a higher power, and there are things, like I love the saying that my sponsor has said this to me, many, many times, that you cannot pick your agnosticism. That if you believe that God is in some things and God is in all things, or God is in the way that you move through things, but you can't just say, well, God is in that, but God's not in that. Maybe there's not a reason you can't understand it, but maybe God's in the strength to get through something, or maybe God's in the compassion to get through something. Maybe God's not in the action of what happened, because I don't believe that. I don't believe that God is in the horrible things that happen in the world to teach us a lesson. I just don't. I don't believe that today. I just don't. But I love that idea. And so I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about the fact that there are certain things that I will not surrender or let go to my belief in a higher power, my higher power, because I still think that ultimately I can control the outcome. And if I pray on it today, that's a lot of me letting go of it and surrendering it, And if you're not a spiritual or religious person and you just want to say, like, I just give it to the universe, or you write it on a piece of paper and you just burn it, it's like there are certain things that we just will not let go. It's like, is there one thing that you just continue to talk about over and it doesn't even have to be on a spiritual level. Is there something you just continue to talk about and talk about and talk about and talk about and talk about till you drive everybody crazy? And that people are probably like, God, I wish they would just shut up about it. You just can't let go of it, because once you stop talking about it, you no longer are giving power to it, and you just have to continue to give it power because you want to be validated. You want to be heard over that, right? But what would it be like if you just let it go? What would it be like if you just said, I'm not talking about it anymore. I've talked about it enough. I have no control over it. I have no control over what happened to me. Unless I'm processing it in therapy or I'm working through the issue, I am not going to continue to talk about this issue. It's not bringing me any happiness or joy. There's no solution to it. It's not bringing me the people around me. I'm not going to continue to talk about it anymore. That's a lot of what surrendering or letting go something like let go, let God to a higher power is. Well, many times in my life, when I was talking to my friend last night, I was like looking back and I was like, there are things that I wasn't willing to let go of because I still ultimately felt like I could control the outcome, and I've talked about this recently about scripting conversations, scripting outcomes. If this happens, then I'm going to do this and this happens. And that's ultimately about fear, right? That's ultimately of fear of not knowing how something's going to happen or how something's going to end. But do we really have control? We really don't. How many times have you scripted a conversation that never even goes the way that you think it's going to go? Or you can try to control an outcome or script an outcome that never even happens the way that you wanted it to, or thought it should, or were fearful that it would. Many times in my life. So what's the point in spending hours in bed trying to sit there and try to figure something out that may not even happen that way, may not happen at all, or could happen 10 times worse or 10 times better? We just don't know. So for me, as a spiritual person, I have to ask myself, what things am I gatekeeping from God? What things am I gatekeeping from my higher power that I've got to let go of? Or maybe it's not even on a spiritual level. Maybe I just talk to my therapist about it, or my sponsor, or a friend, and say, I need to let go of this. So I'm going to talk to you. Can I talk to you about it one last time? And then I got to let it go. Or journal about it. Or paint about it, When I go on my walks, I've been listening to a lot of music, and when I'm on my walks listening to music, it's a good way for me to process in a way that I don't do. I want to get back to my audiobooks, but it's a way for me to kind of process my thoughts about stuff that's going on, and it's really, really healthy for me. It's interesting how much I work through on my walks, So I think the question is, it's not necessarily a question of surrendering or letting go. And this is something I guess I really, really need to ask myself. Am I holding on to things that I am resistant or refusing to surrender? When people say, I can't accept that, When we're talking about acceptance, are we maybe talking that there are some things we don't have to say it out loud to say, I don't accept this happening, or I just can't believe this is happening? Are there things that we are unwilling to move forward through, move through, do the work through? Are we just willing, like we just want to stay here? That's not a healthy place. I don't want to stay in misery, resentment, pain, and anger for the rest of my life. And so surrendering is letting go of that and moving through it. Then at some point, that's the only option on the table. And it's either, then the acceptance piece is, do you accept that you're going to surrender, or are you going to stay miserable for the rest of your life? That's an easy question for me. I don't want to stay miserable and unhappy for the rest of my life. I'm not. So you surrender it up. And what you realize is you really don't have that much control over anything outside of yourself anyway. So what were you trying to do all this time anyway? I mean, that's the question I ask myself on the daily. I still try to control outcomes. It doesn't work very well. Anyway, I'm going to leave off with that. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.